Right, it's May 28th. Finally starting another batch. Been going very slow this year, so I'm getting it set up to pre-freeze or to get chilling. So I'm getting it started for a batch of strawberries. We're doing fresh strawberries, so we'll be slicing them up, putting them directly onto the trays and putting them in. So this is one of the times where I don't have things already frozen. And I don't have anything in the freeze dryer, so I can use those trays and put them directly on the trays this time. So we'll get this going and then go finish the strawberries. So I'm starting it with customize, which is what I always do so that I can see all the data on screen that it'll show me, and start custom. And close the drain valve. And we'll get the strawberries in there just as soon as we get them on the trays. So we'll be back. Will we show them all at once? I don't know. We'll probably show the last tray going into the freeze dryer, because now we'll go up to the slicing. Chef Store had strawberries on sale. I think it was $3.19 for a 2-pound container. So we've got a bunch of strawberries. We're going to slice them up and put them on the trays. So I'm planning on trying to use this Spam cutter to slice the strawberries. So I'm going to use my littlest knife to go ahead and take the tops out. Okay, so that's my plan. We'll see how it works. So we'll get these into the freezer and then the freeze dryer, get the other 3 pans ready, and we'll get them going. I've got the strawberries on the trays. Some of them got a half hour in the freezer while I was getting all of them finished, and a little bit less for each tray. The last tray never made it to the freezer. But now we'll get them weighed, put a thermometer in, and get them in the freeze dryer. And tray 1, and 1602. And of course that's the gross weight. Yeah, so I'm going to just tuck the thermometer in between some slices. It's not going to be perfect, but it tells me the information that I'm after later. And tray 2, 1609. Tray 3, 1522. So that one's kind of light. And tray 4, 1628. All right, and this was the first one that I filled up. So it took 1 full hour to get all the strawberries prepped and on the trays, and now weighed and ready to go in. And during that hour, of course, the machine was chilling. The thermometer inside that's touching the barrel says it's at about -34 now, and the shelf temperature is about 6 degrees. So we'll get them in there and get them freezing. Do we have a seal? No, we do not. If you've been watching for a long time, you know I like to make sure I have a seal ring all the way around the seal, so that when it does start the vacuuming in a few hours, and I'm not here, that it doesn't pull any air across that seal. And if it's a long time, or if it's very humid here, you might end up with some ice along there, and that'll prevent the seal from completing for a few seconds, and it'll draw a lot of warm air in there. We don't need any warm air, so I like to make sure that that seal is up against there and leaving a ring around here. And the amount of space we're talking about is much thinner than a sheet of paper, so it's very, very small amount of space. It's not a giant deal, and you could just ignore it. I like to make sure that way I can tell early if there's any issue with the seal. So I'm going to use my little frosting spatula and just put it in that groove and twist it to move that seal just that fraction of an inch forward. Okay, now we have a complete ring all the way around that seal, and I know air won't be going across there. So these should be done in about 2 days. We'll come back and check them. So don't go away, it'll be just a second. This batch of strawberries has been in there for about 45 hours, 45 and a half hours. So we're going to take them out, weigh them, put them back in for the weight check. They're probably quite done. I've given them extra time already because I wasn't ready to take them out. So it was supposed to be taken out about 11 o'clock, and so it's had an extra 4.5 hours already. So we'll bypass the rest of the added time and get them out and check them. So I'm just using the down arrow, and I'll open the drain valve.
Taxi!
Okay, starting at tray 1. 832. And I'm going to be switching the location of the two trays. So tray 2, 825. Now we'll switch those two, and I'll put tray 2 up on top, and tray 1 will come down a spot. And I do this just because these middle two spots tend to be slightly warmer. 812. And 830. And we'll switch those. And this tray is noticeably cooler. Yeah. So with the drain valve closed, I'm going to add more dry time, and it'll remind me, close the drain valve. It's closed. And I don't need to worry about the cooling because the fan's blowing on it. And the newer ones don't have this same issue anyway. They're a completely different pump. So I'll be back in 2 hours or so, and we'll take them out and check them to see if they lost any weight. If they don't lose any weight, they're dry now. And most likely they were dry hours ago because they already gave it about 5 extra hours. So we'll be back in just a little while and check them. In the meantime, we'll get the label stuff ready. Now, I just wanted to mention this real quick. I've been just using paper and not actually a sticker label for my bags because I'm really cheap, and this keeps the cost way down. I use a laser printer, so I never have to worry about them smearing. Then I just cut them. I have it set up. I'm using open office labels, and so I have a 2x5 array and just print them that way. I'm sure there's lots of ways that are probably considerably better and other machines that would be better for printing, but I have this already, so I didn't have to buy anything. And then I'll fill in the rest of the information because I don't know how many is going to fit in a bag. I don't know if I'll get a ½ pound in a bag or a full pound, and that would be before drying, not the weight of it now. So I'll put the amount before drying, so ½ pound, ¾ pound, 1 pound, and then I'll add how much water was lost in case I need that later. There's 7 pounds, well, about 7.5 pounds, 7.4 or something pounds of strawberries in that batch. So I'll get 7 of these bags labeled in preparation for a pound in each. So I'll add the batch number to the bag. I'm back. It's just about 2 hours later. We'll get them out and get the weight checks done on them. So first I'll bypass the rest of the time using the down arrow. And then I'll open the drain valve, and then we'll open the machine. As soon as the pressure is equalized, we can open the door. Okay, starting with tray 1. Okay, 832, so no change. Tray 2, no change. And make sure that it's not touching underneath. It's good, no change. And finally tray 4, and no change. So I'll get this turned off using no defrost. And I'll get this moved away from here before any of these cold, moist air comes down and adds moisture to these. All right, so it shows 47 3/4 hours, but we know for sure that it was done at least 2 hours ago because that was the rewarm. I suspect it was done a great deal before that, but since I don't know positively, I'm going to use the 45 3/4 hours as my time. So before we check the power usage, we'll get the defrost fan into place. And we'll wait to turn the fan on until after we're over for bagging so we don't have to listen to it. Now the power usage. Okay, that batch was 29.16 kilowatt hours, and it would have been less if I'd have been there on time to check it. All right, so I'd mentioned about this model of vacuum pump and the ballast. So it has the little ballast knob on there. And what I've been doing to experiment with it is I have a small, well, what size is this? It's a ridiculously small. It's about 1/4 millimeter thick, so it's very thin. And this knob has an air intake, and basically it lets air in alongside the threads, and then it has an O-ring on it. So what I've been doing to experiment with using that ballast function to keep my oil cleaner on this old model is I started screwing this in, and then I took that filament piece, that piece of plastic that's 1/4 millimeter thick, and I just held it against the screw and then screwed it down slightly snug, so not super cranked down, but pretty good. And you can hear it when it's running, when you get it what seems about right, but it lets just a little bit of air through and gets sucked through, and it acts more like the newer model ones. But more than that, you'll be spraying stuff out of it. So it needs to be just barely on, or at least that's what I've been testing with. And so far it seems to keep the oil immensely cleaner than it did without it. Otherwise, if I didn't have the continuous flow filtering system, you'd need to really change the oil and clean it every batch or two. And with my filtering system, I'm changing it dozens of times for every batch. Well, with this going, I'm only running that pump part of the time now, and it seems to work out pretty well. So probably do something more showing a little bit more of detail of that if anybody's interested. Tray 1, get the thermometer out and we'll find out what the final total is. So 823.
Yeehaw!
817. 804, 822. Now, because this is going to take a little while to get these all bagged, I'm going to put them into a 2-gallon bag and zipper it shut while I'm getting everything worked out. That's a 2-gallon bag. That's a lot of strawberries. It was 7.43 pounds. Now it is, here's what I've got. I'm hoping to bag them in 1-pound bags. Now, what was 1 pound is now 37 grams. So the total weight now is 275 grams, which is about 0.6 of a pound, 0.6 of a pound, and it was 7.43 pounds. Now each bag needs 37 grams if I want to get a pound. So I'll find out if that'll fit. If it won't fit, then I'll do some other amount. But I think that would be 7 bags, and then I can snack on the other 0.43 pounds. And I have a plan for those actually. So we'll see what'll fit, and I'll do the math for 3/4 of a pound just in case it won't fit. And this first one, I'll check it before I write all the numbers on the bags. Now, the hope is 37 grams. Okay, so I'm not going to get a pound into there. It's not going to fit in this size bag. So I'll recalculate for 3/4 of a pound. Stay tuned. Well, we'll try it again using different amounts. So 3/4 of a pound would be 27 3/4 grams. And I think we can fit that in the bag. So let's try 3/4 of a pound. 27 3/4, that's extremely close. All right, so that's a good amount, and that's how I'm going to bag these. So finish labeling these that there's 3/4 of a pound. So now we've got a label for now. And one of the viewers had mentioned that they take a picture of their food packaging and then put it on their bag. I like that idea. For one thing, it's the lazy way to do it. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to type it up. Take a picture and then print it out. I think I'm going to try that out too. So we'll get these labeled and then we'll get those on in there. Okay, and this is the one I'll keep out for some experimenting and snacking. One of the things I want to point out with these strawberries, again, these were fresh strawberries that I cut, and you can see they held their shape wonderfully. They didn't collapse. The ones that I've bought that were individually quick frozen, the IQF ones, most of those fruits tend to collapse at least a little bit. And I wonder if it's because when you flash freeze things, the ice crystals are extremely small and therefore they do not puncture the cells as much. And so it keeps the fruit looking better. However, with freeze drying, we need holes out of those cells for the water to get out. And by freezing them slower in the home freezer, I'm wondering if that's what's happening, if it's actually damaging the cell structure slightly more, which will help in freeze drying and it'll also aid in rehydration. It doesn't seem to happen with the vegetables, but it does seem to happen with the sugary things like pineapple and strawberries and mangoes and things. So I wonder if that's the reason. Anyway, that would be an interesting experiment to try. For now though, we'll get oxygen absorbers in these and get them sealed. And once again, I'm using 300 cc oxygen absorbers, and then I'm going to tuck the oxygen absorber down the side to keep it out of the way of the zipper and move the bag over so I don't lose my place. Yeah, I'll get these, and I'm not going to try to really push much air out because they're pretty full. So I'm going to pull the two ends and start zippering it from the edges toward the center. So that way I won't crush them up. Okay, so again, I'm gonna just kind of squish it, or grab the two parts of the zipper, give it a pull, and start closing it toward the middle. And that's just how I like to do it on the ones that are pretty full, so if I'm worried about crushing the food. And these strawberries are not as structural as some foods, so they're more likely to squish or bend than they are to really shatter. But they definitely will break. doing that first one twice to make sure that it's all the way heated, because this particular model doesn't have the silicone piece under here. It's just more of the metal under a piece of the tape. And of course, I check my seals frequently with a test piece. So I'm not actually doing a test right now. And finally, I'll get the gross weight of each bag written on the bag. So 53 grams, the way it sits now. So if I've done a bad job of sealing, or I put a puncture in it, or it's a bad bag and moisture starts getting in, it'll get heavier and I'll be able to tell right away. As soon as these have all the weights on them, we can get them into the bins for storage. And if it bounces between two numbers, oh, that one actually did, then I'll take the higher number because it's on the verge of that number already. Now, 9 of these will make it to the shelves for storage, but one of them will just remain out for some testing. So these strawberries are going to go into bin 20. They're going to go into bin 20 front, which is the bottom one on this shelf. And we have a total of 3 sets of shelves, which could hold a total of 60 of the bins, 30 of the giant bins and 30 of the small bins. But the back shelf has some other stuff on it for storage, so it only is it's only partially being used for the freeze-dry storage. The front 2 racks do have 40 bins on them, and they're pretty much full, except for the front 2, or the bottom 2 of 20 front and 20 back. And I still have more bins sitting out on the floor that I haven't been able to get on any shelves. Of course, that's kind of by choice. I could have just done it, but then I'd be putting these into bins on the floor. So, and this is where the sliced mushrooms ended up from the last batch. Now we'll add some batch 26, the 9 bags of strawberry that are going to get stored, and the other bag will get used. Okay, so with that, I'll take the piece of tape off because there's not enough room in here for a batch. There might be enough room for a bag or two, but that's true with most of the bins. So when it's time to do the next batch, it can fit in 20 back. Okay, we'll see you on the next one. So this is kind of a line jumping rush job. This batch is 629 and was supposed to be another batch of pears. But number 1 child said she wanted a batch of strawberries, and strawberries were on sale right then, so we got a batch of strawberries for her. And I think I showed a little bit of that going on to trays, but I don't remember. Oh, that was the picture I posted on the community page, was her strawberries. So anyway, I borrowed my sister's trays because mine were in the freeze dryer with pears, and loaded them and pre-weighed them. So now all they got to do is toss them in there and they'll be ready to go. So we just finished a batch of pears a few hours ago, defrosted it real quick, and including pulling out some ice with the little grabber tool. I used this little grabber tool because, as some people said, you can use something, you can use like a wood back scratcher or something and pull the ice out, but then you have to take the seal off. And I really hate taking the seal off because it's sealing perfectly. So unless it's time to clean it, I don't like to take the seal off. Anyway, we'll get these in there. It's been pre-cooling for just about an hour. The thermometer touching the barrel says it's -35. It's cold enough to get the food in, so we'll get it in there real quick. I weighed these as I was finishing each tray before I put them in the freezer, so they're ready to go right now without anything else. It's about 9:30 at night right now. So the last batch of strawberries that was very similar to this took about 45 3/4 hours. However, I don't know exactly how long it really took because that was the machine time minus the dry check time of 2 hours. So it was in there for about 47 3/4 hours. But there was a good portion of that where it was waiting for me because I wasn't ready to check it. So there was a number of hours that shouldn't have been counted, but I don't know how many. The newer machine, like my sister's, it stops the counter when it's not freeze drying. So when the cycle is done and it's waiting for you to come and check it, it stops the counter. Mine doesn't do that. So if I wait for 10 hours, or if it waits for me for 10 hours, it just keeps adding those hours. So I don't know exactly how long it took. Anyway, hopefully we'll get better data on this because the timing's going to be better. So even if it's a full 48 hours, that means it would be 9:30 at night 2 days from now. But it's going to be less than that, most likely. So it's going to be in prime time for me to be here. So we'll see you back here in 2 days, or it'll be just a second. Don't go away. The strawberries have been in there for 42 3/4 hours now, and it finished just a few minutes ago. There's still over 100 degrees on the trays, so it's plenty warm to take them out and check them without having to worry about condensation. That's the main reason I usually make sure that they're very warm before I take them out. If you take them out and they're ice cold, the second you take them out, well, even before you take them out, as soon as you let the air in, there's moist, warm air going in there and it's going to condense on the food and on the trays. And we don't want any of that. So I make sure that it's warm when I take them out. We'll get them out, we'll weigh them, put them back in for the dry check. So this is about 3 hours less than the previous similar batch of this, the one that I wasn't on top of. So this one we really haven't lost much time. So I'll open the drain valve and we'll get them out and check them. And as soon as the pressure is equalized, we can get the door open. We'll start with tray 1. And boy, those look wonderful. Okay, 822. So that means all the strawberries on there weigh less than 100 grams now. It was about 2 pounds. Wow, they feel dry, they look wonderful. And actually I have given them about 45 extra minutes because I was working on a 3D print. So they have had a little extra time already. Okay, tray 2, 814. And we'll switch the positions of those. Look how great those look. Okay, tray 1 will come down a spot. Tray 2 I'll put up a spot. These two spots on the rack tend to be slightly warmer than the outside two, especially this bottom one. Okay, tray 3, also 814, and tray 4, whoops. And this one is noticeably colder, the tray itself. The food is still warm, but the tray is getting very cold. And 815. Okay, we'll put tray 4 up a spot, tray 3 down a spot. This back in place, and again, this disc doesn't really matter when you're restarting it immediately. Its use is really for when it's cooling at the beginning and it's freezing for 5 hours, 10 hours. Mine never has to freeze for 10 hours except for maybe ice cream or something. But because I pre-freeze everything, the freeze cycle is actually relatively short, 4 hours to 6 hours. So we'll get the drain valve reclosed and we'll add more time. So more dry time, and it reminds me to close the drain valve, and I did. Continue, and it'll remind me to let the pump cool, but I've got the fan on it to keep it cool. And the newer ones are different than this anyway. The new pumps are fabulous. So I'm going to check it at about 2 hours. So I gave it 2 1/4 hours. That way it's going to take about 10 minutes to get down to vacuum, and then it's going to turn off the heaters the last 15 minutes. So this way it gives me close to 2 full hours of actual dry time so I can make sure that it stopped losing weight. We'll come back and check it in a couple hours. The batch of strawberries, batch 629, will be done in just a couple of minutes. So I'm getting the labels ready, and I'm just printing my labels on regular paper and then using regular Scotch tape. This particular tape, the 810 one, it's considered archival, so I'm really hoping it's going to hold up long term for the freeze drying. I'm just using open office labels to make my labels and to get 10 on a sheet, and I'll probably change later and do less on a sheet but make them a little bigger and put a lot more information on them. But in the meantime, this really works well. Get 8 labels real quick, and then I can tape them onto the Mylar bag. Mainly because I'm too cheap to use stickers, and I haven't found one that I'm really happy with for price and quality. I'll write the batch number on each bag. And these are not going to be around very long, in the sense that we're not even putting these on our shelves. These were requested by number 1 child, and they'll be picked up this weekend. And I don't know that there's a real right and wrong way to label the bags. The main thing I'm after is that batch number, because I can refer back to my notes for lot tracing, and I could identify what's in the bag, the date that it went in, the conditions that it was dried in, the hours, the weights. So I've got the information about that batch in case I need that information later. A normal commercial production type situation, you would have all this lot information, it would be tracked. I could tell you, in the old days I could have told you who was working on that line that day, which line it was produced on, when, what time of day it was produced. So everything about that batch of food. That way, if there's ever a problem with it, it can be traced back to a specific, each bag can be traced back to all the details about making it. Alright, and all these can be opened because I already know that they're going to fit in there with 3/4 of a pound, and that they'll be ready to go. And I'm probably going to put slightly more than 3/4 of a pound because that batch has a little bit more than 7.5 pounds. So I'm going to simply divide it by about 10 and put that much in the bags. The bags are all labeled and ready to go, and it's been about 2 hours and 5 minutes since we put this in for the dry check. So let's get them out, find out if they were done. We'll bypass the rest of the time. I'll open the drain valve, and as soon as the pressure is equalized, we can get it open. Okay, and tray 1, and they're still nice and warm. 822, so no change. Tray 2, 814, no change. After moving it, I better make sure it's zeroed again. Tray 3, okay, no change. And tray 4, and also no change. We'll stop the machine with no defrost. We'll get these moved over and we'll come back for the machine data. Okay, the time on the machine says a little bit less than 45 hours, and we know that it was dry at least 2.5 or 2.25 hours ago. And plus, with the time of loading, unloading, everything, we can take off about 2.5 hours, and we know it was done then. So we'll back that up by 2.5 hours and use that as our how long did it take to dry time. So 42.5 hours approximately. Now we'll get it ready for defrosting, and I noticed that there's a pretty good piece of ice under there. I'm going to put this in here to melt that little ice dam away first. And the aluminum will melt a groove in there real quickly. And I only do anything like this when the water level or the ice level is pretty high, because it makes a couple of ridges underneath mine near the front, and it will come flowing out the front a little bit if I don't. It's certainly not a normal everyday thing. We'll turn this on to defrost it as soon as we're away from it, so we don't have to listen to it. Now, the power usage. So this batch took 29.35 kilowatt hours, and we'll reset it. Okay, and then this is, and the 3.5 is the amount of power. The 3.5 watts is what it's using for the electronics of the harvest, right? Well, it's not running, but it's still turned on. And now to the bagging. So we'll get the thermometers pulled out of there and get the final weights, and then get them bagged real quick. 813, 806, 806 for that one also, 807. Since I have all my bags ready, labeled, and I know what I'm putting in them, it's going to be very fast. If I thought it was going to take more than just a few minutes, I would go ahead and put all of these trays full in this big 2-gallon bag to protect them from the ambient moisture, the moisture in the air, until I can get them bagged. But I should have them bagged very quickly, so I'm not going to worry about it on this one. So let me get the math real quick, and we'll find out how much is going in each bag. So for this batch of strawberries, there is only 390 grams of strawberries left now that they're dried. It was 3723 grams, so 8.21 pounds of strawberries before they were dried. And now it's less than 1 pound. Most of it is water, 3,333 grams of water. So now they weigh 47.5 grams per pound. And since I'm going to bag them about, well, I was going to bag them at 3/4 of a pound, but then I'd have a little bit left over that I would just have to eat. So I'm going to bag them a little heavy. So I'm going to go about 38 grams per bag. That'll give me 10 grams to eat. And number one child, she'll get more per bag. And since she's not worried about rehydrating them, I don't have to worry about them being a little extra. It just keeps them kind of even. So let's get them bagged. All right, so around 38 grams for each bag, so that's going to be close to 8/10 of a pound, a little more than 3/4. Kind of shake them down a little bit so that they'll fit, and that'll be a nice size bag. So these are the ones that I put through the Spam slicer twice. I put them through once and then turned them 90 degrees, put them through again. So these would be nice size for adding to yogurt or cereals. And I'm going to eat them. These are really good. And these have only stuck together a bit because of the sugariness of it when they were wet. I could have froze them separately on trays and then loaded them on there, and then they wouldn't have done that. Wow. These are really good. And this size would be really good in a lot of things. I'm using 300 cc oxygen absorbers to put into each bag. A 300 cc is enough for about 1.5 quarts of air. Now, these bags will have less than 1 quart of air because 1 quart is if you blow them up like a balloon and then seal them off. These will be pushed down and they'll have a little bit less than 1 quart to begin with, plus a little bit of it is taken up by, or a little bit of the space is taken up by the food itself. That's not really that much because most of that is still air. Anyway, these are enough for a 2-quart size, assuming that it's not like a balloon. Going to tuck the oxygen absorber down the side of each bag and kind of slide them over to make sure I don't miss one. And then we'll get these closed up. So I'm going to pull the 2 ends because they're pretty full. So if I try to just close them like this, I might squish them too much. So I'm pulling on the ends and then working toward the middle and then sliding that zipper shut. These zippers are not near as good as heat sealing, but they do slow down the air transfer, so I want to get those zippered quickly. Okay, now let's get these sealed. And I'm going to do that first bag twice. Okay, got a nice seal high up on the bag. I've got enough room that could be cut and resealed, but this particular batch is going to number 1 child. She won't be able to reseal them. So it's only important to keep it above the zipper on this one so she can tear off the top and still be able to re-zipper them shut. Strawberries, pears, apples, a bunch of the fruits will start to get softer and chewy, some of them in just a few hours after you tear that top off. It does not take a lot of moisture to start to turn them chewy. Ripe pear slices, we've opened those before. Those will get chewy in just an hour or 2, especially if you're baking a lot of stuff and so there's a lot of moisture in the kitchen with these slices. Normally these would be ready to put into the bins on the shelves, but not this set. They're going to number 1 child. She'll be picking them up in a few days, or we'll deliver them, whichever. So these are done and they do not get to stay. And in a few hours these will be squished down by about 21% as the oxygen is absorbed out of the bag. All right, now we'll get ready for the next batch, which is back to the pears that these interrupted. It's June the 28th.
You said June. It's May.
May 28th.
Yeah, you said
Plainly May 28th. Obviously May 28th. So, I guess that's it. Let's get them in there. So the bags are all labeled and ready to go. It's been 2 hours and about 10. So the bags are all ready. The bags are all labeled and ready to